Hi everybody, and welcome to our webinar, 5 Keys to an Integrative Approach to Lyme for Practitioners. So my promise for today is that you will learn what it means to adopt an integrative approach to chronic Lyme disease and why it's so important for our patients' recovery to do so. You know you're in the right place if you're starting to recognize that many of your patients or clients in your practice may be impacted by chronic Lyme. You realize that Lyme is a really complex illness and want to make sure you're covering all the bases that need to be covered, or at least know what you need to refer out for. You struggle to know where to gather information on how to treat chronic Lyme and who or what is a reliable, credible source. Or you feel overwhelmed at the thought of treating Lyme disease, but you know your patients need your help. So our snapshot for our webinar today, we're going to talk about what is an integrative approach, what an integrative approach to Lyme disease means and why it's important, 5 keys to an integrative approach to Lyme, and tips and strategies for success. I'm also going to share with you some details about the Lyme Ed Practitioner training program that I have just launched. It's a 25-hour online program outlining in detail how to do an integrative approach to Lyme disease, including everything from nutrition, detoxification, naturopathic approaches, factors that hold back recovery, living with Lyme long-term, how to utilize essential oils in treatment protocols, and using CBD in Lyme. There is also an entire module on allopathic or antibiotic approaches to Lyme because we're talking about an integrative approach. So we're looking at the best of Western and more alternative therapies. The practitioner course also includes a module on practice management considerations and also where to start and how to treat without getting overwhelmed. But before we get into the material today, let me just take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Nicola Ducharme. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and I'm based in San Diego, California. I'm the owner and medical director of Restore Medicine. I also have a blog website called The Naturopathic Mama, and I've written 4 books on Lyme disease: The Lyme Diet, Beginner's Guide to Lyme, Lyme Disease in Australia, and Lyme Brain. And now I'm the creator of Lyme Ed, which are online programs to support both patients and practitioners in the treatment of chronic Lyme disease. So let's dive in. What does an integrative approach actually mean? Well, integrative medicine, by definition, is a healing-oriented medicine that takes account of the whole person, body, mind, and spirit, including all aspects of lifestyle. It recognizes the importance of the therapeutic relationship between practitioner and patient and makes use of all appropriate therapies, both conventional and alternative. Some of the principles of integrative medicine: a partnership between patient and practitioner in the healing process, appropriate use of conventional and alternative methods to facilitate the body's innate healing response, consideration of all factors that influence health, wellness, and disease, including mind, spirit, and community, as well as body, and a philosophy that neither rejects conventional medicine nor accepts alternative therapies uncritically. It's recognition that good medicine should be based in good science, be inquiry-driven, and be open to new paradigms. It involves the use of natural, effective, and less invasive interventions wherever possible. It embodies the use of broader concepts of promotion of health and prevention of illness, as well as the treatment of disease, and involves the training of practitioners to be models of health and healing committed to the process of self-exploration and self-development. So when we're looking at Lyme disease, an integrative approach would be a whole body approach, including every system and process, recognizing the way that they work together. It would be an approach that blends conventional Western medicine with more natural approaches, and it recognizes the important role of lifestyle factors like nutrition, stress, toxicity, and so on. One of the challenges I feel is in more conventional medicine or Western medicine, the body is divided into systems. So we have a neurologist who's looking at the nervous system. We have a rheumatologist that's looking at bones and joints and connective tissue. The psychiatrist looking at the brain. The endocrinologist looking at hormones and glands. And the problem with Lyme disease is it can't be that easily segmented. It's a whole body illness and needs a whole body approach. Now, I'm not for a minute saying that our patients don't need their specialists. And I'm a big believer that treating chronic Lyme and addressing these patients, we do need a team approach. It's impossible to think that one person could do everything that they need. But the problem is a lot of our patients have gone to various specialists along the way, and the big picture has been missed because each specialist is looking at it through their specialty, through the lens of their training. And so I think that's one of the big reasons that Lyme is sort of underdiagnosed, because we're a more holistic practitioner, such as a naturopath or a naturopathic doctor, or indeed a sort of more integrative internist, primary care doctor, may be looking at more of the big picture. A lot of the times when our patients get funneled into specialties, the big picture gets lost for the specific area that they're looking at. So one of the first keys of an integrative approach is adopting a multimodality approach. So some of the modalities you want to consider may include dietary modification, herbal antimicrobials, detox support, digestive support, homeopathic medicine, antibiotic therapy, nutritional supplementation, home-based detox tools like coffee enemas, Epsom salts, dry skin brushing, castor oil packs, energy-based therapies such as Reiki, frequency-based therapies such as Rife, oxygen-based therapies like ozone or hyperbaric oxygen, essential oils, IV nutrition therapy, neural retraining, stem cell therapy. I mean, the list goes on. There are a host of different modalities that can be used. And let me make something clear right at the outset here. By no means am I implying here that if you are going to treat chronic Lyme, or if you're already treating chronic Lyme, that you are responsible for doing all of these modalities. So we're all going to have our specialties. And I work with an integrative psychiatrist here in San Diego, where she's really focused, she focuses on her specialty, the psychiatric elements, but we work in partnership and we share, quite a few patients. And so it's just recognizing the importance of an integrative approach, and that no one single treatment or modality is going to be the be-all and end-all. And they don't all have to be in-office procedures either. I mean, certainly many of our chronic Lyme patients are facing financial hardship. So I think it's really crucial to encourage patients to do what they can do at home. Have them do coffee enemas, or some even do rectal ozone, or at least their dietary modifications, or whatever detox therapies they can do. We need to get them kind of involved in their own treatment as well. But it certainly doesn't all have to be you. And even if your specialty is just one of these modalities, you're really focused on diet and can really help people with nutrition, or you're a Western MD and you know your antibiotics inside and out, fantastic. We need you. We need everybody in this. It's just important to recognize how much value there is to doing other kinds of support. So for example, if you're listening to this and you're an MD, and you know that in your treatment of chronic Lyme, you're mostly doing or will be doing antibiotic therapy, then great. Maybe you can team up with a naturopath in your neighborhood to offer more of the detox support and nutrition support that could really help your patients get the most out of their treatment. So just looking at what modalities to use with patients, I mean, some obvious preliminary questions would be, what are your areas of training and expertise? So we are going to have all kinds of different practitioners in this program, and there's going to be a myriad of different practitioners even listening to this webinar. So you just have to know yourself and what your training and expertise is. What's your prescriptive authority or scope of practice? For me, where I practice, I am allowed to write for antibiotics, so long as they're not IV antibiotics. I can do orals and injectables, and I have my naturopathic scope of practice. So I can do IV nutrition, and I'm pretty well trained in herbs and nutrition and things like that. That's my scope of practice. Other people may not be able to prescribe at all, and so they will either need to focus on the natural modalities or team up with somebody who does have prescriptive authority. So that's obviously going to be a directing force as well. Do your patients tend to tolerate energetic approaches more than herbs or supplements? Some people who are really sensitive may do better with just some very gentle energy techniques before even moving on to herbals or other kinds of supplements. It even comes down to things like, are they more likely to be compliant with liquid tinctures or tablets and capsules? Sometimes it's, can they do capsules versus tablets? What do they prefer? I have a patient who can swallow capsules but gags on tablets. That directs what I give her. What financial limitations and allowances do they have for their treatment? And chronic Lyme, it's hard because a lot of people have been misdiagnosed for years and they've tried this treatment and tried that treatment and put money into this and money into that. And it's really hard. And some people have a greater capacity for that than others. Obviously, everyone's in a different financial situation. But some people have a second mortgage on their house, or they've sold their home to pay for their treatment. So we have to be respectful and cognizant of that. What other providers do you have in your area to refer out to? So that's a big one too. Who's in your network? Who's in your team? Who can you collaborate with? I have some great practitioners that I collaborate with my patients. I have a Reiki practitioner that I adore. I have an integrative psychiatrist that we work really well on, especially some of these younger children and teens. I've had general primary care docs that I've worked really well with along the way. So it's just really good to have a network of providers, not only to help your patients get the best of everything, but also just to give you a little support along the way and a little bit of that not feeling so alone with a practice full of really chronically unwell people. So then there's always the question, to antibiotic or not to antibiotic? And there's no clear-cut black or white answer to that. To be honest, it's very individual. I believe people can get well using natural therapies. My opinion is, and I've always said this, and I know that there will be practitioners who absolutely disagree with me and who have got people well just using just herbal protocols. My opinion is that herbal protocols alone are not going to be enough. It's important to try and incorporate as many modalities as possible if treating all naturally. So I'm not saying that everybody has to do antibiotics, nor am I saying that nobody should do antibiotics. And that's one of those principles of an integrative approach. Remember, it was, you want to use as least invasive treatment as possible, but we certainly don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. And antibiotics have been life-giving and life-changing for a lot of my patients. So, I still use a lot of antibiotic therapy. I just don't view them as the sole approach. I use them as part of an integrative treatment. I also think that antibiotics are more beneficial in the early phases of treatment. So I'm not even saying in people with acute Lyme, because most of the time once patients get to us, they're already in the chronic stage. But just in the earlier phases of their treatment journey, just try and knock down the microbial load as much as possible. But the key is to try to get people off them as soon as possible too, and have other treatments kind of take over when their immune system's a little stronger and when their body's not dealing with such a bacterial load. Ultimately, the long-term approach is really and truly healing the body, regulating immune function, and repairing collateral damage. But I feel that in the beginning, when there is a high microbial load, just trying to support the immune function and expect it to take over is, in my view, a little unrealistic. I do think we have to do something to knock down the pathogen load so that the immune system can catch a break. I think we need to evaluate treatment priorities too and see where to start. There's no way we can do everything at once. There's actually no way people can do everything. I mean, there's just the reality of how many herbs or treatments or modalities or supplements people can do. Some people have a greater capacity for that than others. But we just need to remember that we just need to find our starting point and to move gradually through that. We certainly can't do everything at once, nor should we try and do everything at once. So key number 2 to an integrative approach to Lyme is treating Lyme as a multi-system, multifaceted illness. So we've talked about different modalities for treatment. Now we need to look at the range of treatment priorities. So when we look at chronic Lyme, on paper, it's a bacterial infection, but it's really much more than that. It's much more than just an infectious illness. It impacts every system of the body. And so it's important to look at treatment sort of from a broad-based standpoint to address a variety of things that need to be repaired and rebalanced. So some examples of this that I see sort of every day in my practice: hormone dysregulation. People's adrenals are worn out. I see low cortisol more than anything. Thyroid dysfunction, often autoimmune Hashimoto's thyroiditis. Reproductive hormones get up the creek, and a lot of women have a really hard time with their symptoms around their reproductive cycle. I see neurotransmitter imbalances, brain chemicals like serotonin, GABA, dopamine, norepinephrine. Mitochondrial issues with the energy-producing units of the cell. And so we want to look at repairing that. Toxicity is a huge one. So that can either be, we think of it as, through the Herx reactions, which is the die-off of pathogens, but also toxicity from metals and mycotoxins and things like that. Inflammatory processes, which is part of immune activation. And inflammation is a big, big thing that we talk about in regards to nutrition, because nutrition is one of the key ways to manage inflammation in the body. And then recognizing that Herxheimer reactions are not just toxicity, they're an inflammatory cascade as well. And that's what leads to a lot of Lyme symptoms. So we want to sort of work on managing inflammation the best we can. Autoimmune processes. I see there's a lot, like I said, with the thyroid. Hashimoto's thyroiditis comes up a lot. Gluten related. A lot of people become gluten intolerant through the course of their illness. And I see a lot of autoimmune processes in my patients. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have autoimmune disease. I see RA factors and ANA and some of these other lab markers of autoimmunity. I see them turn on and off throughout their treatment. And so it's not a black and white thing. Sometimes there's an autoimmune process in the body that we need to regulate in order to get the chronic Lyme picture under control. So all of these factors contribute to the most common symptoms of Lyme. So we see a lot of fatigue, anxiety, depression, insomnia, pain, cognitive, neurological symptoms, loads and loads of symptoms, pages of lists of symptoms that can be related to Lyme disease. So I want to just, point to this little triad here. I mean, yes, we have the infections themselves, but then we also have the damage to the systems that the infections cause. And we have the other causes that are contributing to the overall picture. So we don't just want to look at infection. We want to look at what else is going on in the body that's causing a problem and how is it damaging the systems that we need to repair. So key number 3 is empowering patients to do everything within their control to assist the process. There is a lot that our patients can do within their own life and in their own homes to assist the recovery process. These things are often free or inexpensive and don't require the guidance or direct supervision of a medical practitioner. So in some cases, people may need a nutritionist or, a naturopath to help them kickstart their dietary choices just so they know what to do. But the actual doing it is really up to them. Patients need to be invested in their own recovery process. And I don't say that in a sort of mean way. I mean that there has to be a level of self-responsibility, and that it's impossible in chronic Lyme for a practitioner to do it all for somebody. As much as we might want to wave a magic wand and make all our patients better, which I know we do because these poor folks have gone through so much and they suffer so much. However, I have found the best outcomes in my patients who are the most proactive. And everyone's going to have different limitations. Some people are bedbound or housebound, and they're entirely dependent on other people for their care. So they may not be in as much of a position to do this. But where possible, we need to get patients involved and invested. So examples of this: dietary modifications. That's one of the key things. Nutrition can reduce immune activation and inflammation in the body. It is key. Modification of lifestyle as much as possible to allow time and energy for healing. Again, it's not for us to dictate or to judge what people do in their lives. People have different priorities and different needs. However, we can encourage them as much as possible to manage their work schedules and their family commitments and things like that to try and help their body get as much healing time as possible. So burning the candle at both ends is not conducive to healing, but I have patients who do it. I have patients who work 14-hour days. They still want to go out with their friends. They still are, doing too much exercise for someone with a chronic illness. All of these factors, they don't want to give it up because that would be sort of admitting that something was wrong. And it's just, they're not going to get well as quickly, if at all, because they're just taxing their body too much. Now, I have another patient I'm thinking of right now who's a single mom, and she works in a restaurant at night because then she can be there for her daughter in the afternoon, and the dad can come in at night and take over. I mean, there are some things that you got to do what you got to do, and I understand that. But as much as possible, we want to encourage people just to slow down, give their bodies a chance to rest and recover. Adopting stress management techniques like meditation, journaling, yoga, those kinds of things. There's lots of different options for that. But again, if we're in a sympathetic state, right? So if patients are in fight or flight, and they're locked in that sympathetic overload, there's no healing that takes place then. The body can't heal when it's in fight or flight because it's always on edge and thinking there's some emergency it needs to respond to. We want to try and shift our patients back into parasympathetic state because that's the rest and digest, and that's where healing can really take place. Sleep hygiene is a big one. So adopting a healthy ritual around sleep, trying to get as much sleep as possible before midnight. I'm always suggesting to people that they remove phones, wireless devices, even plug in alarm clocks to reduce EMFs in the bedroom. I'm finding that more and more patients are very sensitive to electromagnetic frequencies. And so just trying to reduce the use or eliminate Bluetooth and Wi-Fi as much as possible, not sleeping near electrical charges, unplugging as much as possible, certainly no iPhones and iPads in the bedroom at night. And that can really profoundly help people's symptoms. And as I've mentioned before, utilizing home-based detox therapies, dry skin brushing, Epsom salt spas, coffee enemas, things like that don't really cost anything, and that people can do at home on their own time. Key 4 is be on the lookout for other factors that might hinder recovery. So you're starting to get the picture here that really when we're looking at chronic Lyme, I'm not telling you all of these things to try and completely overwhelm you or scare you off. I'm telling you to be realistic that this is what our patients are up against. And we can serve them the best by taking this sort of more comprehensive approach. One of the top ones I see is mold toxicity. That's one of the greatest hindrances to recovery. And it's hard to pick because the symptoms mimic chronic Lyme very closely. Also, the genetic factors that predispose to one will predispose to the other. So things like methylation and things like that allow or that impact one's ability to detoxify will make one more susceptible to both things. So just have patients think back, take an inventory of where they've lived, if they think they've been in a water-damaged building or seen any signs of mold in their house, school, or workplace. You could run a mycotoxin test. There's a couple of labs that do that now. Or refer to a mold specialist. Again, if it's out of your comfort zone, but the patient's like, oh, I know I lived in a house that had black mold, and I really got worse when I moved in there. That's a good clue. That's a red flag. Maybe have them see someone who knows what to look for and evaluate what role that might be playing for them. People living in moldy houses have a really hard time recovering from Lyme, and this is a really tough one because I have some patients that know they're living in a moldy environment, but they simply do not have the wherewithal to move. They don't have the finances, they're not well enough to be able to pull that off, and it's a really complex, tricky situation. And I don't know what the solution for it is. I don't think there is necessarily a solution for it. But again, these are the things that we can be looking out for and just being aware of. Like I said, you don't have to be the one to manage all of this for them. It's just the awareness to know, what maybe to look for or who maybe to refer to. Other factors, heavy metal toxicity, that's a big one. History of vaccines, amalgam fillings, they're both sources of mercury, seafood in the diet. A lot of people have elevated lead levels if they're living in an older house that may have lead-based pipes. Other toxicities like polluted water, areas of heavy spraying with pesticides, glyphosate, which is the chemical that's in Roundup and a lot of other herbicides. That stuff is hugely, hugely toxic. And you can actually measure glyphosate levels in your patients now through a urine test. So just having them be aware of things like that. Toxic home environment, cleaners, personal care products, perfume, scented body lotions, and things like that are, artificial fragrances. A lot of people, when they clean up their home environment and just gradually introduce sort of toxin-free personal care products and cleaning products and such, feel a lot better. Toxic relationships too. Now, depending on what relationship you have with your patients in terms of how much to sort of pry into this, but some people will make it very evident and tell you all about relationships in their life that are very challenging for them. And sometimes it involves their illness. Sometimes it's somebody that they're close to, a spouse, for example, that doesn't believe that they have the symptoms they have, or that is withholding financial support. I've seen that too. I mean, I've seen so many different scenarios in my patients, but toxic relationships can be a real hindrance to recovery. So that's something to look at with people. Infection-related factors, co-infections. You sure your patient doesn't have any co-infections that haven't been addressed and treated? You doing something for biofilm? The bacteria can get stuck in biofilm, and that reduces the ability of antimicrobials to get to them. Parasites. Are patients doing coffee enemas? Are they seeing signs of worms and parasites? I won't even start to tell you some of the stories I hear about that and the photos that patients send me, actually. Should they be taking anti-parasite herbs or medications? That's another consideration as well. So things that you may want to look at evaluating: adrenal testing, doing a salivary cortisol test. Pyroluria is another fairly common one. Methylation and other genetic testing, heavy metal testing, and mycotoxin testing. It might just help give you an assessment of what else is going on for your patients other than chronic infection that their body is having to struggle with. Key number 5 is recognizing the emotional and energetic aspects and try to address them. Now, I've alluded to this a little bit along the way in the webinar already. A lot of Lyme patients have had a really long, painful journey, not only with their illness itself, but with their experience with the medical community. And so we've had a lot of people who have been shunned by their doctors, who've been told that their illness is all in their head, who've been thrown out of doctors' offices or yelled at. Again, I've heard some horrible things. And that can be very, very traumatic. So it's natural that people feel anxious or depressed or angry or resentful or bitter or, all of those things. The problem is if they stay stuck in those places, it doesn't facilitate healing. And Dr. Bransfield, who is probably the top Lyme literate psychiatrist currently, he talks a lot about post-traumatic stress disorder. And he is quite sure, as I am too, that quite a few Lyme patients have a form of PTSD. So I really try and encourage people to seek out professional help to try and process and release those experiences. A lot of people have painful parts of their history even outside their illness experience. So some people have trauma from having Lyme. Other people just have traumas of life, bringing into their world that are running alongside their experience of their illness. So either way, whether it's, cause or effect or just two things coexisting, I do see a lot of patients struggling with emotional issues and prior traumas and things of that nature. One of the things I think is really clever is Annie Hopper's work with limbic system retraining, and her work demonstrates that if prior traumas and negative thoughts and emotions get stuck, they impact the limbic system of the brain, which then can filter to all different things, including mental, emotional, sort of psychiatric symptoms, but also very much physical symptoms. And I've seen people who've done her limbic system retraining program whose physical symptoms improve profoundly. So that's not the only way. There's lots of ways to kind of work on processing those emotions and those stuck points. Talk therapy or psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, family therapy, neurofeedback, EMDR, emotional freedom technique or tapping technique, the DNRS, dynamic neural retraining, which is Annie Hopper's system, and other energetic therapies like Reiki as well. The most important thing, whatever the modality or the method is to work through it, is to recognize that negative thoughts and emotions can be really toxic to the body. And I find this whole field of neuroplasticity fascinating, that the thoughts we have dictate how our neural pathways develop. So if we repeatedly have positive thoughts, those positive neural pathways will strengthen. If we have repeatedly negative thoughts, we'll strengthen those neural pathways too. So it's kind of like the adage, if you think you can't or you think you can, you're right. But it's more, if you think negative, that you'll end up with more negative thoughts because you've trained your brain to do that. So I explain that to patients, and I say that can have a really big influence on how you're creating these neural pathways, and that they can strengthen either positive or negative pathways. But I always let them know that it's a choice, that, when they're in pain and sick and tired, that those positive thought patterns aren't necessarily just going to appear all by themselves. They have to very proactively choose them, and they have to choose them in a repetitive fashion to get those neural pathways to strengthen. So it's like it's discipline, it's a practice. The other thing I find with our Lyme folks is that often family and friends just cannot provide the level of support that they need. So family and friends often try to understand. They want to be there. They don't know what to do. They don't quite understand it. The person doesn't, quote unquote, look sick. And so I just think that a lot of people need help beyond just having a cup of coffee with a friend. And that professional help is important for a lot of people. So let's turn now to some tips for success. So step 1, don't get overwhelmed. Now that might be really easy for me to say. And especially if you're newer to treating chronic Lyme, it can be incredibly overwhelming. So I just want to kind of acknowledge that and, just help you to not feel like that's unusual. I certainly was there when I started treating Lyme. There are still some days that I'm there. So it's very natural to feel that way. There can be a lot. But what I was saying earlier is that, I think we want to have kind of this big picture view, like a big picture outlook on different things that can be influential in our patients' health and different things that could help them. But also just remember that you can't treat every single element all at once. There are a lot of bases to cover. So the easiest way to not get overwhelmed is to make gradual changes. Just go very steadily, step by step. So this is easier on you, especially as you're learning Lyme and learning how people are responding to different modalities or treatments that you provide. But it's easier on your patient too. I often say that I think treating Lyme is like playing chess. So you need to figure out kind of where you want to be 3 moves from now and work towards it in a step-by-step fashion. Of course, adjusting along the way if you need to. But again, it's just a picture of kind of having that bigger kind of goal of where you're going with this person, but just going one step at a time and recognizing that you don't want to rush into doing too much all at once. Keeping a slower pace is fine. Lyme treatment is a marathon, not a sprint. And to be honest with you, rushing it can cause massive setbacks through overwhelming hooks for the patient. I've learned this the hard way, and I did it as recently as a few months ago. I treated too aggressively, too quickly, against my better judgment, but I got influenced by a patient, and I made the wrong decisions, and it made her really sick. And that patient actually, she wanted to treat really aggressively, but sometimes we just have to kind of keep the brakes on slow everything down, and realize there's no quick solution for chronic Lyme. So I do somewhat work with my patients on how gradually or aggressively they want to treat. But ultimately, the fast or aggressive approach may not be best for their health. So I'll give you a couple of examples. I had one patient who was starting college 6 months from when I first saw her. She was Canadian. She needed to be in the United States and to be in school to keep her visa current in the United States. So she said, look, I've got 6 months. I can sit on the couch feeling rubbish for the next 6 months. I have to be well enough to start school next year. So we jumped in and treated aggressively for 6 months. Now, to be fair, she was very proactive with her own detox, with her nutrition, with her mindset. I mean, she really pulled her weight and did everything that she needed to do. But we made a decision to go a little faster than I normally would because that's what she needed in order to keep her, lifestyle factors alive. Other patients they'll say something like, I am a single mom. I'm working. I've got children I've got to take care of. I can't be flat out. I cannot be in a state where I can't function and go pick up my kids or get them dinner or whatever. So it does depend a little bit on their lifestyle and what their needs are. But if in doubt, go slower. Never go faster if in doubt. Just recognize that things don't always go perfectly right away. Our hope is always that our patients stick around for a while. I think sometimes when people have gone through a lot of different treatments, they have treatment fatigue and, they just get sort of fed up with the process. So if something doesn't work in a month, they're off to the next thing. We can't control that, right? So we need to set their expectations about how long treatment is going to last, what they can expect in the next couple of months, when we anticipate they would start feeling better, and when we, anticipate, and these are all estimates, that they're going to get a certain level of functioning back. We can't predict all of those things, but I think if we set really conservative expectations, then they're not going to come back in 3 weeks and go, oh, I'm not better, which is unrealistic. So we just want to give them realistic expectations, but I would say conservative, like buy yourself a little bit more time. Most people are okay with that if they feel like, you're on their side, you've got their best interests at heart, you're doing the best that you can to provide them treatment without doing anything to hurt their body. People will be patient, but set the expectation for them. Make sure to individualize the plan. So again, with the complexity of Lyme, in the beginning, it's tempting to sort of follow protocols. I'm not saying that's entirely bad. And there are certainly protocols that I follow, and I follow ILAD's guidelines for, antibiotic treatment, etc. But with time and experience, you'll learn to individualize the plan a little bit more. So just try and be aware of that, when you're with a patient, be looking at what does this patient need? What is this medication going to be the right choice for them? Or do I feel like they're too sensitive for that? And sometimes, especially with antibiotics, I'll start with more gentle antibiotics than the ones that are the quote unquote best for Lyme. And I'll even tell them, I'll say, look, I'm starting you on a more gentle protocol. These are not probably the strongest, most aggressive medications in each of their category, but I think this is an important starting point for you. And if I see that you tolerate this well, then we can rotate in other medications. So you really want to personalize it for their specific needs and circumstances as much as you can. And I think that's easier as time goes on and with more experience under your belt, because you'll just get to know, different modalities and different protocols better. Also, this is a tough one. Realize that patients are getting a lot of information on the internet and through social media about what other people are doing and what else is out there. So it drives me crazy sometimes. I mean, I like that they get support and I like that they're well read and informed. But the problem with that is then they come into your office, they've compared their treatment to everybody else's. Everyone else is taking this and doing that, and they've got this dose and they're at this point and doing this other therapy, and should they be doing that too? And why aren't they on this particular thing? And I mean, the only thing I can say is just stay confident and stay in your own integrity. And don't let yourself be swayed if a decision doesn't feel right to you. And I've already told you 2 minutes ago that I still fall for that sometimes. I do view treating with patients as a collaborative, team-based effort. So if a patient says, I really read up about this, I really feel like that could be good for me, what do you think? Then I'm happy for them to give input But at the end of the day, especially if you're prescribing for them, it's really got to feel like the right choice for you as the practitioner. So when you think about all of this, you think about your Lyme patients, you think about your patients that you see now that have been diagnosed with chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia or even MS. How do you feel about that? Do you know that there's more you could be doing to address the underlying cause of their illness, which could be chronic Lyme after all? Do you want to do more, but you just don't know what to do next? Do you want to get more educated and empowered and learn how you can help these patients better? And would you like one place that brings it all together in bite-sized, manageable pieces? If that is you and you are looking to get more educated and learn more about how you can help these patients, then Lyme Ed is for you. Lyme Ed is an online program for all things relating to integrative approaches to chronic Lyme. It's a program I've created to help you navigate the complexities of chronic Lyme. It's got 11 modules, 25 hours of teaching, giving you specifics of how to treat chronic Lyme comprehensively. So just to step back for a moment, when I started working with Lyme disease back in 2005, I didn't want to learn the antibiotic regimens at all. I was a naturopathic doctor. I didn't know enough about the antibiotics. It all just felt too foreign and too overwhelming, and I just didn't want to touch it. And so I had some great MDs in my network that I could refer out to, and that's what I did for the first 2 or 3 or 4 years. But as the years went by, I learned more about antibiotic protocols, and I was able to incorporate them into my protocols with my own patients. And so now I feel like I'm in a position to be able to draw on the best of both worlds, and I have a really good understanding of how the two fit together. And I have found that a lot of people want an approach that brings conventional and alternative to medicine together. And I love being able to offer that to my patients. So what I've done now, because I see such a need for other practitioners to find practical education on how to incorporate Lyme treatment into their practice, I've condensed pretty much everything I know about Lyme into an easy to follow, clearly structured online program. So if you sign up for Lyme Ed Practitioner program, you'll get lifetime access and you'll have a reliable source of information to keep coming back to. So I offer you the information so that you can start or continue to work with these really complex patients. I'm so passionate about educating and supporting both patients and practitioners of the treatment of chronic Lyme disease. It's just, I've dedicated my life to it for the last sort of 13, 14 years, and I really have a heart for it. But I see there's such a need, and we can reach our patients one-on-one, but I also see a need for getting information out to the patient base as a whole, but also better education for practitioners so that you can feel more confident and more able to take on these cases. Lyme treatment's also so individual. It's impossible and unrealistic to treat, but there's just not enough of us that are well-versed in integrative approaches. So this is where having that resource to keep coming back to and learn and reinforcing that information is key. Another example I would give here is if you are a naturopath in a country where you cannot prescribe, or if you're a naturopath in a country where you can prescribe but you choose not to, or if you're an MD that doesn't want to do antibiotic therapy, that's all good and well, but I would still learn about the antibiotics just enough that you can recognize certain things and understand what some of your patients may be doing with another practitioner. So again, I'm not saying that one practitioner has to offer every modality and every approach, but I do think the more we can be educated on some of these broader areas, the better off we'll be. The other example I would give is if you're an MD and you're looking at mostly doing antibiotic therapy, there are some resources in Lyme Ed that you can provide your patients that will help them to know how to help themselves. So there's a nutrition, the Lyme diet how-to guide. There's a detox home therapies how-to guide. So there's a lot of resources within the program too that you can provide for your patients to help them out. So let's get an overview of what's included. So I mentioned 25 hours of teaching. There's 11 modules. So module 1 is all about understanding Lyme disease, really going through some of the nuts and bolts, the different definitions of Lyme disease, and also what's really going on. What are the mechanisms? We know we've got infection, but we've also got inflammation, we've got immune suppression, we've got toxicity. So just getting some of that foundational information. I do go over a little of the history and the epidemiology, and also the political issues in Lyme disease, just because I think it's important to have that context to know how this illness has evolved. We look at how is Lyme disease transmitted, sexual transmission, congenital Lyme, things like that. And then also the complicating factors in Lyme disease, the different bacterial strains, the bacterial forms, co-infections, biofilm. There are things that will come up numerous times, multiple times throughout the program, but we'll start getting some definitions laid down so that you have an understanding of those things. Module 2 is all about diagnosis. So we go through the different signs and symptoms, the different stages of Lyme disease. We'll look at, is Lyme an autoimmune problem? And we'll look at different options for testing for Lyme disease and co-infections, and also how to know what tests to run and how to optimize your results. Lyme testing is notoriously unreliable, so I'll give you some tips of how to get the most out of it, and also a list of other tests to consider that may not just be about Lyme and infections, but other tests to consider to evaluate the health of your patients. Module 3 is all allopathic treatment of Lyme disease. So we talk about whether antibiotics or no antibiotics are the best, what to expect with antibiotic therapy, what are Herxheimer reactions. We look at some of the common side effects of antibiotics, and I give you some advice for strategies for success. If you have someone who's doing antibiotic therapy, how can we set them up for the best results? Then I go through protocols, antibiotic therapy for acute Lyme, for chronic Lyme, for co-infections, in pregnancy and children. We talk about pros and cons of IV and injectable medications, pulsing medications, what to do when antibiotics stop working, and I give you medication dosage summary chart. Module 4 is all about detoxification. And this is the first module that's getting into sort of more naturopathic treatments, but I put detoxification first because it's so important. So I talk about why detox is so important in Lyme, looking at things like delineating detoxification versus elimination. Is detoxification and a Herx reaction the same thing? 3 fundamentals of detox, how to help people reduce incoming toxins, supporting detox through nutrition, through supplementation, and how to support elimination so that we're actually getting toxins out of the body. There's a whole guide on home therapies to support detoxification and elimination, and this is written in such a way that you can actually give it to your patients as a handout. And then putting it all together, where to start, some detox drinks, things of that nature. Module 5 then goes into naturopathic treatment of Lyme disease, so the treatment triad that we looked at earlier. So we want to support immune function, manage inflammation. I review the herbal antimicrobials that I have seen the best results with. We look at different biofilm agents and looking at how to address opportunistic infections like chlamydia, pneumonia, mycoplasma, viruses, and candida. Then we switch to looking at how to help your patients with symptoms, so natural approaches for pain, mood, cognition, sleep, and energy. There's a lesson on important micronutrients in Lyme disease. What vitamins and minerals do they tend to need the most? And then other therapies to consider, IV therapies, oxygen therapies, frequency-based therapies. There's some guidance on getting kids to take herbs and supplements, and also some sample protocols and case studies. Module 6 is all about hormone regulation in Lyme disease. So we look at hormone hypothalamic pituitary axis, a whole lesson on adrenal hormones, a lesson on thyroid hormones, and a lesson on reproductive hormones. Module 7 is digestive issues in Lyme. I outlined 6 main causes of digestive disturbance in Lyme, including side effects of medications, coexisting GI infection, inflammation caused by food allergens and gluten intolerance, disruption of normal flora in the gut or dysbiosis, leaky gut, and then the Borrelia and co-infections themselves in the digestive system. Module 8 is nutrition and Lyme disease. So I look at why dietary modifications are crucial for healing from Lyme, and also some strategies of how to implement change without becoming overwhelmed, because some of our patients get really overwhelmed really easily. I go over the fundamentals of the Lyme diet and then break it down step by step, how to use nutrition for reducing inflammation, for supporting immune function, for digestive support, for hormone support, to support detox and elimination. It's important that we understand how those things work and why different dietary modifications impact them. I look at nutrition for offsetting side effects of antibiotics, and then just do a brief overview of some of the different other diets that your patients may be talking about or following. Paleo, autoimmune paleo, GAPS, FODMAPs, low oxalate, low histamine, and ketogenic diet. And then, as I said, there's a Lyme diet action plan. There's like a 35-page guide that's available for you to provide for your patients to give them practical information to follow. Module 9 goes through 10 things that can hold back recovery. So these are all some of those sort of other underlying causes or other underlying factors that you may want to identify. Untreated co-infections, biofilm, heavy metals, methylation defects, pyroluria, parasites, mold toxicity, toxic environment, thought patterns, and a high-stress lifestyle. Module 10 is about living with Lyme long-term. So it's about helping people to address the psycho-emotional aspects of Lyme disease, the importance of that emotional healing, like we talked about a little while ago. And then I highlight 2 strategies that I really like, which is the emotional freedom technique or tapping and Annie Hopper's DNRS system. I talk about what does recovery from Lyme disease look like and the reality of maintenance long-term. These are things that I feel it's important to talk about. Our patients come in with those questions like, am I ever going to get better? Can you cure Lyme? Am I ever going to be symptom-free? Am I always going to be, worried about relapse? How's this going to impact my family over the years? They have all these questions. So I just give you some discussion points on that, which is obviously coming from my opinion. But I think it's important that we do have those conversations. Module 11 is putting it into action. So where to start when working with complex patients, in brackets, so as not to get you overwhelmed. But just kind of, if in doubt, here's a good starting point. Keep it simple, keep it slow, and that way it doesn't feel quite so overwhelming. And then I cover some practice management considerations. So as you treat Lyme, I should say, you will attract more Lyme patients. And if you end up with a practice that is busy with chronic Lyme, there are some inherent challenges in that. It's not an easy illness to treat. And so I just give you some tips, having had a Lyme-dominated practice for about, 13 years and working pretty much now exclusively with chronic Lyme patients. I feel like I've learned some things along the way. So I pass on some of my experience and wisdom to try and make it more straightforward for you. There's also 2 bonus lectures, Rebuilding Health Using Essential Oils and CBD in Lyme disease. They're both modalities that I've seen work beautifully with my patients, so I give you information about that. So the goal of Lyme Ed is to provide you with the practical information you need to be able to incorporate more integrative approaches into your practice. It's laid out in one place. It's easy to follow. It's intuitive. It's clearly laid out. Every module is broken down into lessons. They're clearly labeled. You can, go back and re-listen to any sort of topic that you need to hear again. There are how-to guides for your patients. Not only the detox and the nutrition ones that I talked to you about, but there's like a Herxheimer handout, what to do if you're having a Herxheimer reaction, lots of different things, an appointment summary, consultation form, just some tools for you as well to help. Every module has downloadable notes in PDF forms, and the lessons are broken down into manageable chunks. There's, usually 10 to 20 minutes. Some of them are up to 30, no longer than 40 in any lesson. There are protocols clearly outlined as well, so you get practical information you can use right away, and you'll feel more empowered and more educated in your journey, even if you're already treating Lyme disease. So I did want to point out there is also Lyme Ed for patients, and a lot of the material that's in the practitioner course is also in the patient course, because a lot of it they need to know as well about how their detox works and how nutrition influences their body and so on. And so you are able to recommend Lyme Ed to the patient version of the course to them, so that they also have a lot of education that they can take on. And that sets them up to be more knowledgeable and more empowered in their own health journey. So the pricing for the Lyme Ed Practitioner program is $397. And I also offer a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you are not fully satisfied with the program and don't feel that it's provided the best, greatest value for you, I will issue you a refund within 30 days of enrollment. So I would like to invite you to join me in this program. If you would like to enroll, follow this link. It's www.practitioner.lyme-ed.com. I feel so passionate about helping people navigate the complexities of chronic Lyme disease. But in order for us to really do that, we need more Lyme literate practitioners. And that's what has driven my creation of this program. It's a culmination of 15 years of experience working with Lyme disease. And all the strategies I use with my own patients are what I teach you in this course. I'm really excited about what this program has to offer you, and I don't want you to miss out. So if you'd like to jump right in, then just go to that link and enroll. And if you have any questions at all, please email me at support@nicoladucharme.com. Otherwise, I'll see you inside the course. Well, thank you for joining me for this webinar today. I hope that it was valuable to you, and I look forward to seeing you very soon.